Hello, everybody. Well, it's so good to be back, kind of, with you. I've been having some technical difficulties today, so if the volume goes out for any reason, please let me know in the chat because I won't be able to tell. But if I even think about brushing up against this cord, my volume goes out, and I can't really tell when that happens. So, we are on Unit 6, Lesson 4. We're going to be doing factoring by grouping. Your homework tonight is going to be in Delta Math, and it is due on Thursday. And Thursday at, I believe, 11:15 will be our next stream together for Algebra 2. I'll post all those details, of course, in the Files tab in that homework document. So, I'm not going to do every example on this front page, but I do want us to just do a little bit of factoring practice since we haven't seen each other in a while. And I hope you haven't forgotten about factoring. So, it says factor completely. So the first thing we always want to look for is our GCF. So sometimes it's numbers, sometimes it's variables, sometimes it's both. Here, 3 is a factor of itself and 12. And we have some x's and some y's in columns, so I can take out a 3xy, which means when I'm factoring, I'm really dividing it out. Ooh, this marker got chubby on me. So we should have 1 minus 4xy squared. And then usually when I say I have two terms, I want to check to see if we have a dot situation, the difference of two perfect squares. In this case, we do not, because everything would have to be a perfect square. Yes, the 4 is a perfect square, the y squared is a perfect squared, but the x is not a perfect square. So this one, that's all we can do. And number 2, again, we want to check to see, do we have a GCF? And in this case, we do. It's a 3, so I can divide each term by 3. So I'm left with x squared minus 9. And when I see that subtraction, I want to see, do I have a dot situation? And indeed I do. So just like we practiced, we drop down our double bubble. One's going to be plus, one's going to be minus. You could switch that order around, doesn't matter. As long as one's plus and one's minus, all is good in the world. How do I break up x squared? An x and an x. And what squared gives me 9? It is 3. So now this one is factored completely. Oh, I'll give you a second there. If you weren't able to print out these notes, like, no big deal. Just write it on a, in a notebook or a separate sheet of paper. It's all good. All right. Number 3. We do not have a GCF. Bummer. So we're going to shoot right into double bubble. Whee! So these are the ones that you absolutely loved before we left for quarantine. Haha, JK. A lot of you were not fans. So we got to think, how do I break up 2x squared? Well, my only option is 2x and x. And I'm multiplying to get a positive, and I'm combining to get a positive, which means both of my signs in here are going to be pluses. Oh, wait, this one had a typo. Hold on. I forgot. That should be a 3, not a 2. So, my bad. Fix that, please. All right. What's the only way we can multiply to get 3? Well, it's 3 and 1. But then we got to think about where is the 1 going to go and where is the 3 going to go? Because I'm multiplying and I've got to combine to get 7. So let's try 1 and 3. Now I don't want to double distribute all of that out to see if I'm right. I'm too lazy. You know me. So let's do our quick little check. I've got a 1x here. I've got a 6x here. 1x plus 6x is 7x. So wham bam, we did it correctly. Very good job. Okay. So I'm going to scooch past these because I want to get to the meat and potatoes of today, which is factor by grouping. So if you're writing this by hand. Don't feel like you have to write out all these paragraphs. You know, you don't have to do that. I mean, if you're on YouTube, you have the luxury of pausing, but my live people do not have the luxury of pausing unless you tell me in the chat, hey, you're going too fast, in which case I will slow down. If there's a little lag, you're just gonna have to go to your settings and change it to like either 420 or 480p. I don't know. One of those will pop up. All right. So factor by grouping is exactly as it sounds. We're gonna factor some groups. Pretty cool. So far, we have only used the GCF method to factor out single terms. But here, we're going to factor out groups. Hence the name, factor by grouping. So, factor a binomial common factor out of each of the following expressions. Write a final expression as the product of two binomials. So, let's look at example A. I'm going to get out my highlighter here. So if you notice, both of those binomials are exactly the same. So I'm just going to highlight them. So when you see that you have two binomials that are exactly the same, that is your GCF, because technically this whole piece is a term and this whole piece is a term. So really you are factoring out a GCF. It just happens to be a super bundle of fun. So our GCF that we're factoring out is that 2x plus 1. And now you're thinking, okay, well, I've got an x here and a 7 here. What do I do with that? So it gets factored out into its own little bubble. The x, the plus, and the 7, wham bam, you factored by grouping. Very good job. Easy as that. So let's try it again. We have to look first to see, are the bubbles exactly the same? Exactly the same. Signs, numbers, everything's got to be exactly the same. So I've got an x minus 2 and an x minus 2. So that's going to be our GCF bundle of fun that comes out front. And then your leftover pieces get put together in its own bundle of fun. Bam! Factor by grouping. Very exciting. Hello to some of you that joined late. We are on the second page of the notes if you printed them out, which again, totally didn't have to. You could just write this down on a separate sheet of paper. All right. Let's try another example. So again, we are looking for bundles that are exactly the same. So here are my bundles that are exactly the same. That's what's going to come out front. And then just like before, everything that's left over gets put together in its own bundle of fun. So I have x plus 5 and then plus the x plus 1. Now that's a lot in one bundle, and we see that we have like terms. So we're going to combine those like terms. I'm going to drop down my GCF, which was my x minus 7, that quantity. And then I just combine my like terms. So x plus x is 2x. 5 plus 1 is 6. Bam. Factor by grouping. So exciting. I love factor by grouping. Just like calming, enjoyable. Like solving a Sudoku. Maybe a little nicer than solving a Sudoku. Sometimes those make my brain hurt. And again, let me know in the chat if I'm going too fast. Just tell me to slow down. It's not a big deal. Because I get excited, as you know. All right. Example D, we're looking for bundles of fun that are exactly the same. X plus 4 and x plus 4 are exactly the same. So that's what's going to come out front. Everything else goes in its own bundle of fun. But this one we need to be careful because the last one was plus. So, you just combine. But here we have a minus sign. So I'm still going to start off by dropping down my first term, that 2x plus 8. But if I'm subtracting off an entire term, I need parentheses there because I'm subtracting off both pieces, not just one of those pieces. So here when we go to simplify, there's a little bit more work that needs to be done. So my x plus 4 comes down, 2x plus 8 hasn't had anything happen to it yet, but that minus, that subtraction needs to be distributed. So I really have minus x and then minus minus plus 2. And now, just like before, I can combine my like terms. So x plus 4 comes down. 2x minus x is x. Positive 8, positive 2 is 10. And now we have factored by grouping. So this one, be really careful. I'm going to highlight that in a different color. That minus sign there. Watch out for it. Okay. Hope we're doing good so far. You're very quiet in the chat, which is okay. Oh, and if you're wondering, why can't I chat and I'm watching the stream, you would need an account to participate in the chat, but you don't need to create an account by any means unless your heart so desires. But it is not a requirement. All right. But that was too easy, right? You're like, I'm just factoring out bubbles, Mrs. Sadler. So you know, obviously, I'm going to bump it up. So this method becomes beneficial when factoring expressions with 4 terms. Consider the following. 2x cubed minus 6x squared plus 5x minus 15. In order to manipulate this expression, we will use the method of GCF in groups to find their factors. So just like before, GCF is always the first thing we should be looking for. So I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to rewrite that. So we have 2x cubed minus 6x squared plus 5x minus 15. And you'll notice that it is written in standard form. So make sure that your expressions are always written in standard form. So what we're going to do is, let me get a different color, is we're going to bundle the first 2 terms together and the second 2 terms together. Excuse me, I should have included that plus sign. Go back. Okay, let's include them all together. So then I'm going to look at one bundle at a time to factor. So there we go. 2x cubed minus 6x squared. So ignore the fact that the other one is even there for a moment. Just focus in on those 2 terms. First, we're looking for a GCF. So we have 2x squared is my GCF, which means I then have x minus 3. So just factoring it out normally, nothing new. If we look at our next terms, we have 5x minus 15. What's our GCF? Well, it's a positive 5, which means then I'm left with x minus 3. If factor by grouping is truly a method that we're allowed to utilize, those bundles should be exactly the same. So we have an x minus 3 and an x minus 3. So now we're doing exactly what we did above. I just added in one more step, but everything else is exactly the same here on out. So that GCF, that x minus 3, comes out front. And then the leftover pieces get brought down. 2x squared plus 5. Bam! Factor by grouping. Very good. All right, we got 2 more examples to do together, and then you're free to do your homework, which again is going to be due on Thursday. All right, so these directions in this next section are important. So if you're writing your notes on a separate sheet of paper, probably good to get this down. So when we factor by grouping, we first extract the common factors from pairs in the binomials. So remember, we bundled them together, and then we factored out the GCF. If we're lucky, we are left with another binomial common factor. So, now I guess I should leave that there for a second if you're writing it down. Sorry. So it says use the method factor by grouping to completely factor these expressions. So, example A. First step is bundle them separately so that you know how to factor them. So let's say bundle the pairs. So bundle the pairs, just put them in parentheses. Step 2 is to factor out the GCF from the bundles. So we bundled them. Now we're factoring out the GCF from the bundles. So in my first bundle of fun, I have an x squared that can come out. Excuse me. So then we're left with 3x plus 2. Now, if you notice, in the next pair of binomials, they're both negative, which means I want to factor out a negative number. So 27x and 18 both have a 9 in common. So I'm going to factor out, excuse me, a negative 9, which means everything left in my bundles will now be positive. So again, when all the terms are negative that you're looking at, you're factoring out a negative. So then we get 3x, our sign's changing again. So plus 2. And now, easy peasy. We have the bundles that are exactly the same. So step 3 is factor out the bundle GCFs. So for us, that's 3x plus 2 in this case. And then the leftovers go in their own binomial. So make sure you get those 3 steps down. I try to color coordinate it for you. Okay. So let's try that again. We have 18x cubed plus 9x squared minus 2x minus 1. So we're just going to look at them individually first. And then we're going to factor out their GCF. So in the first one, 9x squared is our GCF. We're left with 2x plus 1. And now in the next bundle, we see that they're both negative, which means I want to factor out a negative. So I'm going to factor out a negative 1, which will make everything inside there positive. And now I have matching bundles, which is great. It's what I wanted. So 2x plus 1 comes to the front. And 9x squared minus 1 goes in its own bundle. Now, fun case in this one, that second quantity that we wrote down is a dot situation. How cool is that? And this did say factor completely. So 2x plus 1 comes down for the journey. And since I have dots here, put that there. 9x squared will be broken up to 3x and 3x. We have our plus and our minus, and a 1 and a 1. So that was kind of a fun one. Got to throw some dots in there for some excitement. So I hope this video was helpful to you. Let me know. I have my office hours every morning on Zoom from 10 to 11. The link is in your Microsoft team. And then on Fridays, you know, from 1 to 2, you have your own special Algebra 2 exclusive Zoom hour, office hour. Yep. So hope you have a fabulous day, and your next video is going to be on Thursday. So, signing off.